without any further ado, I welcome you to the session 8 of our community of practice. And today's topic is designing tomorrow's living labs. Regarding the agenda, we will first have a small introduction to the 8th session. Then we will have 2 expert sessions, one by Lisa Waldenberger from Boku, who's part of EcoDALI, about the visual roadmap of EcoDALI regarding the living labs. The second one is held by Mihai Pondea from Smart Mobility Solutions, also part of EcoDALI, and he will present the Practice Living Labs system, VLLS. Afterwards, we will have a Q&A where you will be able to pose all the questions that have occurred or that you would like to pose. And then we will have a small collaborative moment about living labs of the future. And last but not least, we'll have a small wrap up and an outlook to the next session. Before diving in, just a small reminder of the house rules. First of all, this session is being recorded and will be put on the Darvatrest YouTube channel. Consequently, I'd ask you to please mute your microphone and pose any questions that arise during the presentation in the chat, since we'll have a moment, as I just said, later on to pose them. And that is during the interactive session. Small recap for those who are not yet fully acquainted with our community of practice. The vision is to help the deployment and upscaling of Darvatrest innovations, and for the community of practice also to become a continuous platform facilitating wetland restoration in the Danube River Basin. And consequently, we will generate ideas for future wetland restoration initiatives to also promote cooperation among a diverse range of stakeholders, to foster co-creative solutions and build capacity, and last but not least, for the community of practice to serve as a link between local communities and European strategies, goals and opportunities, naturally in line with the Mission Ocean goals. The running mode is that there are 3 types of engagements. First of all, we have expert sessions, then room for co-creation and opportunities and consultation. So today, we have a mixture between the expert sessions and also co-creation. In general, the COP is held bi-monthly and every second Friday of the month. So the next session will be held on the 10th of April, 2026. In case you are further interested, you will also receive a link if you subscribe and want to become a permanent member. You will receive emails regarding the upcoming sessions and then naturally again the meeting link.
Okay, so I'm a partner at EcoDALI, and we organized the 4 living labs for EcoDALI in 2024. And the task was to investigate and explore innovative solutions associated to living labs along the Danube River Basin, including its delta. And I think because we already started with this, like, do you know about living labs and what are living labs? There are quite a lot of different definitions when it comes to the term living lab. And we at EcoDALI defined the living lab system not as a physical space, but more as a set of tools, a group of participants, and a temporal structure within an ongoing interaction. One of the main things was to put the communities at the center of the innovation process, and also starting from the needs of local and regional actors. And they create this participatory dynamic and provide an alternative bottom-up approach to governance. So this was quite important also for the whole process to kind of have the first definition for everyone to kind of be on the same side when it comes to the living labs. Next slide, please. So as I said, we organized 4 living labs, upper, middle, lower Danube and Danube Delta, and all 4 of them were dedicated to a specific theme. So we try to connect them somehow by having the same kind of like overall structure to ask the participants first what the needs are and what actions are required to overcome these needs. And I will give you some sort of like insights of what our outputs were. And then I will also continue telling you what kind of like lessons learned we had. And I'm quite curious about what your experiences are, if you've already participated in a living lab, or what kind of like your ideas would be or wishes for this sort of like living lab. Okay, next slide, please. Just to give you some impressions, these are some pictures from our actual living labs before jumping into the output that we then created. So after organizing all 4 living labs, we decided to have this like visual roadmap to summarize everything that we kind of gathered from each living lab and also show the connections between each living lab. Next slide, please. So this is the roadmap of the living labs that we created. It's more like easy to have a look at and understand kind of like visual map. And you can also find it on our website, and I put a QR code so you can have a look. And so this is the whole Danube Basin. And we then also created a page for each living lab itself. Next slide, please. So for example, the Upper Danube Living Lab was related to innovation ecosystems. One of the action points was to enhance cross-border collaboration and governance integration. It's also mentioned to support SMEs and innovation clusters and to bridge the Upper and Lower Danube innovation divide, or to promote like cross-border governance. Next slide. And you can see all this in the roadmap if you want to have a closer look. I'm just going to quickly present to you some of the main points. The Middle Danube was related to climate change, and action points were to restore wetlands and floodplains for natural water retention, but also monitoring was one thing that was mentioned quite a lot, and early warning systems, and to support climate resilient economic development. Next was the Lower Danube Living Lab related to water systems. Action points here were to increase financial resources, upscale local solutions, and implement educational programs to foster a culture of sustainability. And then lastly, the Danube Delta Living Lab was on biodiversity. Here we had a lot of discussion about how to enhance, or how it's important to enhance stakeholder and public engagement, and also to promote economic benefits of restoration, and to advocate for collaboration. Sorry. Now you can jump to the next one. So these were the action points for each living lab itself. But obviously we had some cross-cutting messages, even though the themes or the topics were a bit separate, but the cross-cutting messages were definitely on different aspects. So one of them was the governance, to strengthen the multi-level cross-border governance with strong local participation, was something that was discussed in all of the 4 living labs. Also finance, obviously, sustainable finance for nature positive and local solutions is necessary for all of these themes, as well as communities as co-creators, not just beneficiaries. And nature-based solutions to restore and protect ecosystems is the backbone for climate resilience, and to accelerate innovation, knowledge transfer, and scaling across regions is also one of the cross-cutting messages from all the 4 living labs. Okay. So I think this is one of the most, or I would say one of the most important outputs that we created in Ecodali is we had the challenge to organize 4 living labs in quite a short amount of time. So we really wanted to test different co-creation and stakeholder engagement tools. It was a bit of an experiment in a way. So we tried out different tools such as the World Cafe. We also used the Mentimeter that's been used here now. Also mind maps or fishbowl discussions. We have a whole list of tools that can be used for stakeholder engagement and active participation. And obviously, you never know how these tools are being perceived and how active the participation will end up being. But it was quite interesting to kind of like develop a kind of test base for these engagement tools. Still, it was hard to engage active participation. So this whole concept of living labs is based on co-creation, and co-creation requires active participation. What we have noticed though is that it's still sometimes difficult to get this active participation by all the participants, obviously. Some participants were hesitant to speak up. Also, some were not even, we were not able to reach them, the so-called like invisible stakeholders or actors. These are the ones that are not in the usual network. I'm thinking of youth organizations. I think the representation of youth was quite low. We had them in the Upper Danube especially, but it's difficult to get all the different actors who are maybe not in the usual field of these Horizon projects to participate. We also had all of our living labs in English. We did have some parts in the Danube Delta, also in Romanian, but it was still kind of like a barrier for local actors to participate if the language is English. And one of the things that's also something you should keep in mind is the discussions and the questions that you ask the participants can have some sort of like repetition. So if the time, since our time and space was quite limited, we did have some discussions and there were some fruitful outcomes, but I think if you have more time and more space, you can definitely create more genuine innovation, but that requires a lot of patience and a lot of like, yeah, I think time is one of the main things that you need to consider. So in the end, I try to kind of like summarize what could be some ideas for, or like food for thought. So maybe for us at Ecodali, we did still see the Living Lab approach more on this academic side, or it felt quite academic. It felt kind of like a conference with these active participation tools, but the whole atmosphere was still quite academic. An idea would be to have it more open, dynamic, and informal. That would also invite actors that are usually not participating in these kind of events. Use this like open space format, maybe even have it like outside actually in the field to encourage like spontaneous exchange as well, and actively invite new voices. As I said, youth, artists, activists, community groups to broaden and energize the discussion, which we tried. But as I mentioned, the resources were quite limited and it was very tricky for us to do that. And I think it's something that we can learn from, and it was definitely a very fruitful experience. And it was interesting to see the tools that we've used and how they were, how this created the space for active participation, but maybe not active participation by everyone. And I'm not sure if I have more. I think that's, yeah, perfect. Okay. So thank you for the experiences.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Lisa. If you, as a small reminder, if you have any questions, please, you may write them in the chat. We will answer them after in the Q&A session after Mihai's presentation. So again, thank you very much, Lisa, and I will hand over to you, Mihai.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Lisa, and hello, everyone. Today, I am representing Smarter Mobility Solutions, which is an associated partner in the EcoDALI project. I will try to share my presentation. Hopefully, you can see my screen.
Yep. We can see the, yeah, now we can see the presentation mode.
Perfect. So the Practice Living Lab system is a tool developed within the EcoDALI project, and it's based on 8 pillars. These pillars are policy, governance, human capital, financial capital, data, innovation, hard system for infrastructure, and soft systems for behavioral change. PLLS tool gathers structured data and relevant information from stakeholders through questionnaires and interviews, ensuring that local knowledge, needs, and expectations are systematically captured for the effective organization of living labs. Still. PLS tool helps identify the most relevant stakeholders and appropriate participants to attend each living labs, ensuring balanced representation, expertise, and effective collaboration among all involved actors. PLLS also supports the identification of key priorities and opportunities for cooperation among stakeholders, helping align interests and foster meaningful partnerships within the living labs. And it also suggests possible areas for improvement and practical recommendations, supporting continuous learning and the ongoing development of more effective and inclusive living labs. So here you can see a diagram of how the information is flowing in the PLLS tool. In short, we started out with designing a standard engagement questionnaire that we then intersected with the partner's need for information, thus resulting in the version that we disseminated to stakeholders. Here in EcoDALI, we approached the citizens through a separate questionnaire developed especially for them. And as data is being collected, it is analyzed, and relevant information is shared with project partners so they can better engage and actively involved with the stakeholders. So the process has 4 main phases. The first one, we prepared the framework by developing the standard engagement questions. We had a training for project partners, and also we formed the core team. In the second phase, we customize and plan stakeholder engagement through targeted questionnaires and role distribution. Third phase, we disseminate the questionnaires and collect data from stakeholders. And finally, we analyze the data that we collected. We structure the information so it becomes easily accessible and useful for all Living Lab partners. As mentioned before, we had 2 types of questionnaires. One was distributed to citizens, and for that we had translated the questionnaire in like 7 or 8 languages, and one for the other types of stakeholders like academia, SMEs, and so on. Okay. So here I will show you some, let's say, examples from this tool. We developed the questionnaires to be easily completed in less than 5 minutes. Here you can see a questionnaire that I used to interact personally with the interviewee, maybe even with some people that are present today. We also added definitions for terms that are less familiar. Also, keywords are very important, and keywords help us bridge the informational gap between what stakeholders are looking for and what the project can actually deliver, allowing us to quickly target and understand their specific needs. During interviews, it is important to ensure that the interviewee already has some knowledge about the project, and if not, to first provide a brief general overview of the project. Okay, so for in-person interviews, a set of advices can be developed based on the answers received so that more information can be captured. In a questionnaire that I addressed to a university, we found out that it does not actively support the transition to a circular blue economy, and it's not yet involved in behavioral change programs. However, from other questions, previous questions that they answered, we learned that they have knowledge and are interested in climate change and renewable energy, thus making them a perfect candidate to engage with in the future. So, in conclusions, PLLS is clearly a tool that supports the organization of living labs, and it has to have very clear objectives from the start. Information is captured through questionnaires and interviews. PLLS can engage a large and diverse group of stakeholders within a short time. Analysis of data gathered depends on the objectives, and PLLS can support project and proposals showing a different way of stakeholder mapping and engagement. And PLLS was designed, tested, and analyzed regarding to its potential toward implementation in the living labs, and we also tested in other fields. So I kindly ask those that haven't yet participated or engaged with this tool, to access our portal, which is www.ecodali.eu. There you can access the portal and you can interact with the tool. Also, you can maybe even join our Ecodali portal. So that's it from my side. Thank you and wish you a pleasant day and a great weekend. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mihai. And I've already seen some questions in the chat. But first of all, a small addition by Verena. She mentioned that there was a session in the Black Sea in collaboration with Prefablu that also presented that's also presented in the document of Visual Living Labs roadmap. And she's also posted a link to the Living Labs portal of Ecodali. So diving into the questions, the first question that was posed is from Boyan from Karibas, who asked, who said, for quite some time, I thought we're functioning under the, at least geographically obvious, concept that the name of this living lab is Danube and Black Sea Living Lab. After many arguments put forth in support of the above, it's quite disappointing to see that the Danube Basin is still not considered an integral part of the Black Sea Basin. And the question following that is, do we really see all the consequences of the above? I would pose this question into the room. What is your take on that?
Maybe I can add something. So I'm not sure if that's regarding also my presentation of the Living Labs, because I didn't present the Black Sea Living Lab that was organized because I was not, Boku wasn't part of it. And therefore I only presented the Living Labs from the Boku organized Living Labs, the experiences from our Living Labs. And we did have a session, as Verena mentioned. And so I'm sorry if it came across as we're doing this, but.
Thank you very much. The second question that was posed by Zlatko was regarding whether one geographical area of interest, naturally, environmentally, and socially, can become a living lab that provides both the following of gathering key actors for planning, developing, and climate resilience, as well as implementing co-creative, active and passive restoration measures, furthermore identifying funding possibilities, etc., but also providing sustainability in terms of actors' approach and concrete restoration action. And he further mentions that he sees more or less, in quotation marks, soft activities, but he also points out that living labs should be related to some area of the Danube River Basin, DRB, that should receive restoration measures. Would you like to elaborate on that a bit more, Zlatko, or shall Mihai and or Lisa also mention something to that?
I can add something because I want to know, and many of us, I think, want to know, because I think more of innovation actions. I know that Living Labs was established within the project, and the soft activities in Ecodali and other projects are mentioned. due to many other activities that will be implemented, etc., etc. So I think that maybe some projects could be also living labs dedicated to concrete restoration measures and restoration actions, because we have some criteria for living labs, and my understanding of living lab is combination of these soft activities, involvement, and everything, planning, etc., etc., but also something concrete that will be updated and upscaled during the future. So I want to know, is my understanding of living lab correct or not? Thank you.
Okay, can I try to summarize what you're asking? So you are organizing a living lab in the David Rest project, and you're trying to incorporate different aspects of restoration together, and then see also like combine it with more of like soft activities of discussing this, or what's the?
Let's don't talk about the living lab that will be organized by us. Let's say generally that we have the opportunity to receive funding and everything what is needed. Can we define the living lab as combination of co-creation and soft activities and also restoration actions? This is my question. Of course, we will organize it this year, the living lab, but according to the budget that we have, of course, we are limited in many aspects. So it will be more on, I would say, on soft activities, co-creation, new ideas, and potential fundings, but not concrete restoration action. But maybe for the future, from different,
of course,
I would say,
yeah. I think that's actually one of the even better ideas to like that would upscale. No, it's the whole process of like you have restoration activities, and then you also combine it with like, okay, how can we do the co-creational aspect of this restoration, or how can we even kind of like use this and maybe implement it in other areas, or what's like to have an even bigger discussion about actual measures, and then also the aspects of like as citizens or people being involved in this, and financial aspects and so on. So I think that would be the ideal, or in my opinion, one of the ideal things to combine these kind of like actual measures with the social aspects. But obviously, it's again, we also experience this in Ecodali. It's a lot of like financial aspects for the planning, organizing, and then involving everyone, and a lot of things that might be difficult, but ideally, yes.
Yeah, in my opinion as well, the answer to your question, it's definitely yes. And also it's just like a short presentation of a living lab that you described in the question. So it's living, it's growing, it looks for funding, it's developing, planning. So you have every keyword for a living lab right there in the question.
Thank you very much, both for the question and for the elaborations. I can see that in the chat that Verena specified a bit more on the situation in Ecodali with regards to the living labs. Would you like to say a few things to that?
Maybe just to comment on that, what I've wrote briefly. Of course, we try to include the Black Sea part. Of course, it's a bit unfortunate that Lisa was not involved in the Black Sea Living Lab or stakeholder engagement, so she couldn't really present on them or had not much feedback for them. But it is included in the roadmap, and we did some activities with them. It was just not in our original project description, because when the project was written and the grant agreement was written, it was still a Danube Living Lab. So a lot of focus is put on the Danube and not so much on the Black Sea, which is also a problem, but also hard to change, to add an additional living lab with the funding and the planning of the timeline we had in the project. But of course, in the follow-up, it's something that needs to be more in focus. And also in our last deliverables, we also include a bit more about the Black Sea, although it was not included like in our initial work program or on grant agreement to include the Black Sea so much, because it was just not as clear that the Black Sea, it should be a fundamental part of it. So that's just the flaw of the change in the name and the beginning of the mission ocean, because many things were still unclear. But of course, we know, we are aware of the topic, and this will also be some feedback for our legacy to really have also the whole source to sink and the Black Sea part more implemented in follow-up activities.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other concrete questions at this moment? All right. Then we will continue with with some more questions on Mentimeter, which we will then also be discussing. The first question is, how would you use PLLS? And the question that, or the direction this is, the question is aimed at is, what are the most key aspects that you would use the PLLS for with regards to a living lab creation?
Okay, so let's take, for instance, I said it before in my presentation, but I will say it again. So let's take an example. For instance, you are organizing a living lab on biodiversity. We first know the need for information is on biodiversity. So we send out questionnaires and go do interviews to stakeholders. And then we map those results and filter them in order to find exactly the right stakeholders that we should get in the room. The ones that have information on biodiversity, the ones that have that want to engage and further on develop maybe business models or businesses on these topics. So this is just one example that this tool can bring more people and the right people in the room when you are organizing workshops during the living labs. So is it clear enough, or do we have a follow-up question?
The follow-up question that is also directed to you, but also to the participants in, since the next question is, what challenges do you anticipate using PLLS? So the first of all, yeah, what are the challenges that you anticipated and then experienced? And
okay, so the challenges are that you have to get partners involved in this tool in order to work at an optimal, to have its optimal performance. So maybe that takes time, that takes resources and so on. So basically now we are thinking, and this is something that we discussed within the project, that these tools should be somehow digitalized, maybe using AI and so on. So mapping and analyzing and assessing maybe just basic information, because it collects a lot of information, should somehow automatically be structured in order to the core team, the expert team, to be able to analyze it more quickly and efficiently. So this is the main challenge that we have with this tool.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking at the answers that we're receiving, it appears that one of the main challenges that's anticipated is to first of all the lack of participation and to get people to respond. How did you experience that, and how would you tackle these issues for future living labs?
Yes, so I will have to come back to sharing a slide that this is how we disseminated the questionnaires. So each partner took a role and had this like a multi-level dissemination process. We asked partners to send out to their networks these questionnaires and to do in-person interviews, because that's the most sure and efficient way to interact and to gather data. Also, you can use it by phone or maybe WhatsApp or email. Also, as you can see on our portal, we have a direct form that can easily be completed. So the data actually then comes back directly to the core team. So yeah, this problem it's a problem in every project. The lack of interest from citizens mostly, because partners do want to engage in project because they get financing, they do business, so and so on. But actually, what I encourage people to do is to go down at street level and do interviews directly to people, invite stakeholders face to face and discuss with them, complete the surveys on paper. And this is the most efficient way to engage and to gather people in living labs. And also language barriers have to be crossed, and as we saw, we get a lot more results from the questionnaires and from any kind of survey if you translate it in the native language that you're addressing to. And well, that's kind of it.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions directly to that, or any input from the audience? If you'd like to elaborate something. Otherwise, we'll head to the next question, which also goes hand in hand with what we just heard. So the question is, what can you achieve by using the PLLS method? And we'd like to see your your point of view on that. Which aspect is the most important to you? The first point is that it's a tool to support Living Lab organization. Second one is that the PLS can engage with a large and diverse group of stakeholders, but also the last one, that it can support project proposals showing a different way of stakeholder mapping. And you should also be able to select more than one answer. Just on a side note. Okay, so from the active participation that's currently taking place, we have a tie between that it's a tool to support Living Lab organization, but also that it helps to engage with a large and diverse group of stakeholders. So I believe that, or I can assume that for future Living Labs, that PLLS will be a method that may be used. And the next question, which is almost the last, is which aspect would you focus your Living Lab on? So that is primarily directed at the audience, but also to you, Mihai and Lisa, for instance, regarding if you were to do the Living Labs all over, having the knowledge that you have acquired by creating the Living Labs that were already done. Would you still have the same focus, or would you shift it?
So as I mentioned in the presentation, I think ideally try to include stakeholders that are usually not included. So I think it would be pretty interesting to have more engagement from the youth, and to have it more dynamic, open space, kind of like more of like spontaneous engagement as well. But that's obviously something that would be ideal and always difficult to achieve.
We can see right now feedback, different stakeholders, bridge the gap, co-creation, engagement. And what about a thematic focus? Would you put the focus rather on, as it was done in Ecodali, to have the different foci, like for instance, the Danube Delta Living Lab on biodiversity, or the Upper Danube LL on innovation, ecosystems, or climate change as the Middle Danube, or water
honestly,
systems.
It was a bit tricky because all of these are overlapping anyway, in a way. They're all related, and therefore we try to separate them, but it's overlapping, and there are certain aspects and discussions where when you talk about water aspects, you're going to talk about biodiversity as well, and innovation in general is covering probably all of it, and climate change obviously as well. So it was more of like trying to focus on these aspects, but it was difficult to separate them, or I think it's impossible to separate them in the end.
Thank you very
Again,
much. Yeah.
It's also the way to how to phrase it and to keep it quite open for discussion, and to also let these kind of like open discussions happen. And the discussion of like, we can't separate these topics is also something that you can discuss in the living labs as well.
Very much. So now we have some more additions: thematic area and real environment. I would also pose this question into the audience, since there are some living labs planned. Would you shift the focus with having the knowledge of having the introduction heard now on living labs, or do you stick to the upcoming focus? I guess that we can then just shift to the next question, which is also going hand in hand with your presentation, Lisa. On the question is, how can we apply Ecodali's lessons learned to create new living labs? So again, the lessons learned were, for instance, to move away from a strictly academic living lab approach, create a more open, dynamic, and informal co-creation space, use open space formats, and actively invite new voices. And the idea is now to concretely form our ideas and form the statements regarding this. So we have clear strategy engagement. So I believe that this is then, so first of all, to have a clear strategy and address the different networks that already exist, and to engage with local stakeholders and local voices, so to speak.
Yeah, I think also connecting with like other projects that are doing similar things. And so, for example, if someone is thinking of organizing a living lab, we could definitely also share the co-creational tools that we've used, and more detailed information about how these worked, or what worked and what didn't work, and to have the network from various actors and not just maybe the project consortium itself, because the main thing is the participation from actors. So you have to reach as many as possible.
Okay, then I believe this also thank you. First of all, I believe this also goes hand in hand with partnership with experts, but also with a bottom-up approach, as you mentioned. I guess by adapting the methods that you applied, and possibly change the methods that did not work, or adapt those to the regional specifications, to be properly able to create the bottom-up approach. I believe that would be one aspect of how to apply the lessons learned. Also, publish lessons learned. So, do you mean that to the person that pointed that out? Do you mean publish the lessons learned from Ecodali, or then after the Future Living Lab has taken place, publish what has been learned afterwards? By Ecodali. Okay. The question is, are they, if my understanding is correct, the lessons learned, are they also published in the portal?
I think this is basically the published lessons learned. But I'll definitely take it and see if we can include this somehow in the portal as well, to have some sort of like overall lessons learned and future outlook. Because I also think it's important to share these, not just the outcomes from the actual like content wise, but more also on the whole organizational management aspects of Living Labs. And I think the one point, sorry, Jan, if I take over, but
No worries, do go ahead.
Connect to public events and connect to other events that are happening on the site, or where you're trying to organize a living lab. I think it's a great idea, because then you can already use the infrastructure network that has been built by the event itself.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions or any other input that may have arisen in the meantime? I mean, since we do have two experts or three experts in this room regarding living labs, has there anything come up that you would still like to clarify, or some input that may be helping? All right. Then one point that may not be finished in this session, but that is, I believe, also a good baseline for future living labs and for the assessment, maybe the co-creation space on the mural, which can help to address the needs that the people in this room, or the people in the community of practice, may have regarding living labs. The idea that I have, or that we have, is not necessarily to completely finish it in this very moment, but you are very welcome to add your slides or your specific input into the mural. So you have the different areas of Lower Danube, Middle Danube, Danube Delta, and associated regions. The first question would be whether you do see an added value or not in the living labs and the PLLS methods for your region, and you may choose the different aspects or your opinion by using the little post-its. The second question, or the second task, would then be to choose a possible thematic focus for the living labs that you'd like to organize or that you would like to participate in. And that's where the blue sticky notes come into play. So we have climate change, biodiversity, water systems, and innovation ecosystems prepared. But we also have some blank post-its that you may just drag and drop and then double click to fill out a thematic focus. And the last thing would be, what constraints to implement the living labs can you think of, and what possible solutions might apply? So that's where the green and pink stickers come into play. The green ones are for the constraints anticipated, and the pink ones for the possible solutions. And in case you're having a hard time finding it, it's, if you access the mural, it's on the bottom right-hand side corner. As you can see, I just zoomed out, and you can zoom in just using the mouse wheel. I would like to give you roughly 10 minutes, and at 11:50 CET, we would then continue. So far in the associated regions, there is an interest in, especially on the focus of biodiversity. In the Lower Danube, I believe that the water systems are also part of the thematic focus that would be of interest. Let's see again. One of the constraints anticipated is project duration being too short to provide a significant progress. So one solution might be more active restorations, integration of previous results through sustainable platform that provides data sets, data specifically, scientific evidences, publication, data on capacities that can be reused. So again, an aspect of communication, dissemination, engagement, both with the scientific community, but also with local stakeholders and local communities. Please feel free to continuously use this to provide both us with this input and with clearly communicating your needs, your interests, and a possible focus that may be taken into account. And also, if you have other ideas on possible solutions or anticipate further constraints please feel free to further address them. Regarding a further outlook and a possible wrap-up, as we are getting close to the end of today's session of the Community of Practice, I bid you to please use the feedback questionnaire that we have created to further assess how or whether your expectations, your needs were met with this community of practice regarding the session of Living Labs. But before diving into this, I would kindly ask you, do you have any further questions? Are there any aspects that are still not yet clear that you'd like to also ask both the participants, but primarily our experts, Lisa and Mihai? All right. If there are no more questions, then I would kindly ask you to take a few minutes to fill in the questionnaire that provides us with a bit more detail on your background and your expectations. It's merely 15 questions, so it should be answered quite quickly. So without a lot of without taking up too much of your time. The outlook for the next session is that we will have another meeting on the 10th of April 2026, and you will naturally receive more information on the thematic focus of the upcoming session. And I am hopefully seeing all of you in 2 months' time. And thank you for your attention, and thank you again to Mihai and to Lisa for generously sharing your knowledge and your experiences. And thus, I will conclude today's meeting and wish you all a very nice upcoming weekend.